Hola estudiantes, bienvenidos a la clase de español. Hoy vamos a discutir los verbos que terminan en ER y IR. We're going to be discussing the present tense of ER and IR verbs. Regular verbs that end in ER and IR work a little differently than regular AR verbs. You're probably going to ask yourself, how do you form them? The big or very important concept for this is that the endings for the ER and IR verbs are the same for both ER and IR, with the exception of the nosotros, nosotras, and the vosotros, vosotras forms. The letter change in these two forms actually match the ending of the corresponding infinitive. You're going to see why. Let's look at the ER ones first. Let's look at the verb vender, which means to sell. Again, the verb would be vender. Let's conjugate it the way that we learn how to conjugate it. Notice the red endings. Notice also that they look very similar to the ones you learn for the regular AR verbs, with the exception of the O. But in all of the other ones, whenever you would have an A before, you have an E. So this one should be pretty easy to remember. Again, it would be yo vendo, tú vendes, él, ella, and usted vende, nosotros, nosotras vendemos, vosotros, vosotras vendéis, and ellos, ellas, ustedes venden. Example, Mario vende comida en la cafetería. Let's look at compartir. This is an example of an IR verb. Compartir means to share. And again, even though it's an IR verb, notice that the endings in all forms, with the exception of the nosotros and vosotros form, they all are exactly like the ER verbs in the present tense. So let's look at it together. Yo comparto, tú compartes, él, ella, and usted comparte. Nosotros, nosotras compartimos. Vosotros, vosotras compartís, and ellos, ellas, ustedes comparten. That's why when you see that little comment that I put, I look like that, it means that the nosotros and the vosotros actually are the only ones that look like the infinitive, which means, you know, that ends in IR, and therefore you have the endings that have the I in it. An example with the conjugated verb would be compartimos las uvas. And in this case, I did not put the subject pronoun. And can you guess why? I'm sure that you got it. Because remember, in Spanish, we do not need to add the subject or subject pronoun because the conjugation actually tells us, implied to us, who is doing the action in the sentence. As you can see, the mechanics are the same. You take away the ER and I or IR portion of the ending, just like you learned when you conjugated the AR verbs, the regular AR verbs, and then paste the ending, or you paste in the ending that matches the subject. You have discussed also some irregular verbs that work differently, and we will be learning other verbs that are also irregular. But in this case, I just want you to notice that in terms of regular AR verbs, regular ER verbs, and regular IR verbs, once you know how to conjugate one, you're pretty much good with all the other ones. Again, unless it's an irregular verb or a verb with an irregular form. That will be all for today. As you can see, I kept it pretty short. I hope that you understand it, that if you don't, you can put a post in a motto, or you can ask me in class. Adios.